Welcome to this grading breakdown video of my latest short film, My Meditation. This question came in a lot of times. People were interested in how I graded this project, so here we go. Before we get started, I quickly want to mention that the power grades too and the LUTs are available for free for you to download on my website, so check the link in the description for that. Also, I supply a pack with about 25 raw clips on my website for free as well to practice grading on. So make sure to check that out if you want to follow along or if you want to practice in your own time. Now, also, BenQ sent me this amazing desk light for me to try out because I spend a lot of time behind my computer and they said this will help battle eye fatiguing. So far, I didn't spend too much time behind my computer, luckily, but I will in the coming weeks. Yeah, so far I really like the light. It's a very minimalistic design that sits on top of your screen. Thank you for sending me this unit, and let's start the video. Alright guys, so the first clip that we're taking a look at is our intro shot. Yeah, so this shot is very special to me because not a lot is happening here, but it just draws you into the story. And here I really wanted to pop her away from the background, which is possible of course because she's wearing a yellow dress and the background is kind of bluish, greenish, so that's possible. However, if we deselect all the nodes by pressing Alt-D, you can see that it's not really happening here, so we needed to do some tweaks. Well, let me talk you through it. So the first thing that I do here is I create a CST node to transform into a more workable color space, which is Rec 709 in my personal workflow. So I shot it in Blackmagic Film Generation 5 and I converted it to Rec 709 here. Now I go back one step, I always do this, and then I push in a little bit of extra light basically because this was just, I couldn't shoot it higher in exposure because it was early and I had a telelens on it with a f-stop of like 7 or something, so this was the only way to do it. So this was necessary and I know that my Blackmagic camera is capable of doing this without losing detail. So yeah, so I just put in some wheel section fun here, so I played around with all these sliders until I was satisfied with what I was seeing. Then, however, I saw that the sky was a bit too bright for my taste, so I wanted to really focus the eyes on the middle of the frame. So now, because the sky is quite bright, you are more tempted towards that top part of the frame, which I didn't want to. So what I did here is I played around with the qualifier tool and I played around with the slider, of the luminous slider basically. So if you press Shift H, you can see, oh, whoa, what's that? You can see what I have selected here. Yeah, so I can just select parts of the image on a luminance value basically, so light, and then you have a very nice selection of exactly what you want. Of course, make it softer on the left side and blur it out a little bit to make it more gradient or gradually fading out. Press Shift H again and then play around with this offset or mid-tone slider. And then you get something like this. So now the focus is less drawn onto this area, but more onto this area, and we are getting a little bit of color back. All right, next up, some contrast, very simple, a 0.2-ish contrast ratio here, and then a power window to pop her out of the background a little bit more. I just soft it out completely, otherwise you get hard edges, which looks ridiculous, of course. So soft it out completely, make it big enough, and there you are, basically. So this is with, and this is without. Kind of a big difference. But the biggest difference here happens when I put in my YUV color space. So I make a new node, and I set the color space to YUV right here. Then I go into my Rgb Mixer, and then I play around with this slider, the green slider in the blue output, and the blue slider in the blue output. And this is what happens. Boom. You can see the massive difference it makes. And to play around with these two sliders, you get control over the yellows and the oranges and can sort of drag up the luminance value of it, but also increase the color intensity. So, I don't know. This is kind of dull to me, and this is just whoa to me. Anyway, then next up we've got some sharpening, very simple. And to make it complete, we have a timeline node, which I usually do because it saves a bit of processing power on your computer, to just put a gray node over the entire timeline. Now, my grain is always just a grain plugin from DaVinci Resolve. And then I put a 35mm 400T, put the opacity all the way up, and then play around with the grain strength. But that's usually what I do. And it works nice. So check it out. Next up, we've got some extra little tweaks in the raw section here. I can, of course, do this after my CST note. So make a new note for white balance, for saturation, and for contrast if you want to put a little bit more contrast in it. But of course, I shoot this stuff in Blackmagic RAW, so I have the ability to do it in my raw section. So I do it. I like that more. I feel like it gives me a bit more control over the image and gives me a better output. So just play around with it. There's no right or wrong here, but just because I have the option, I do it. All right, so that is it for this clip. Not a lot, but sometimes less is more. All right, next up, we've got a clip right here. In this clip, I really wanted to put the emphasis on the beautiful colors that the sun creates. Yeah, so this was shot, I think, 2 hours later than this shot. So this shot, the sun just tips above the horizon, which you can see in her hair. And this shot, you know, the sun is like 2 hours above the horizon already. So I kind of was forced to create a silhouette image here just because the sky is blown out already. If we deselect all the nodes, you can see that we do have a little bit of detail in the sky, but not a lot. So I was kind of forced to do it this way, which is fine because I wanted to create an interesting and mysterious look. Now the entire node layout is kind of the same. So it is exposure, CST, contrast, grading, fixed node, and then sharpening. But the thing that is different here is our compound node. So this is my own version of the film look. So I create a film look and I basically copy it over and then tweak where I need to. And then I put it all together in a compound node so I can lower the intensity. Yeah, so without this, it is way too intense. And you see that it's shifting the colors a little bit, but that's because of what is inside the compound node, which I'll show in a minute. But I just like to work this way because I have a little bit more control over the variance in the output. So if we open up the compound node here, you can see that it is a very simple transformation from Rec 709 into Arri Log C. And then I do that because I have a little bit more control. And then I increase the contrast here and there. So this is a very strong contrast bump. And then I play around with the colors. So this is just, again, a YUV color space thingy, which is necessary because now it's very greenish. And this is just some saturation curves. So it's very minimal, but it is essential because without this, the colors wouldn't pop as much and it just looks less appealing to me. So that's what I do on all the clips, right? So this is kind of my workflow these days. Kind of varies sometimes, but yeah. Let's go over to another clip. This is an indoor clip. This was actually shot with one of my own lights, so I taped it to the ceiling and I diffused the original light that was already there. Now, the only thing that I changed here, which was quite drastic, was the, so it was shot on 6500 Kelvin, which was a bit too yellowish for me. So I wanted to have a bit more natural skin tones and all that stuff. So I changed the white balance to 3900, which creates a bit more of a naturalistic look, which I kind of liked. So again, exactly the same node tree layout, grade, adjustments, basically fix, and then sharpening. And then we've got our compound node again. So this is completely different. This is another compound node, but it is based on what I created previously, but then tweaked until I was satisfied with the results. And then I went in here and played around with the intensity until I was happy. That's how I always do it, basically. So the bottom line of this whole thing, of the whole grading thing, is you need set design. So you need the colors in the frame in order to get the colors that you want in your grading, but also you need to think about time of day. A good example is this shot was just perfect, right? So the sun just tipped above the horizon. It illuminated the dress and her hair just a touch. But this shot in particular was like shot before this one. And you can see the massive difference. Yeah, so the dress here is very poppy, and the dress here is looking kind of dull. Nothing happens in her hair. That was because this shot was shot before the sun actually tipped above the horizon. We got a lot more detail in the sky here and a nicer gradient, but it just, I don't know, it just doesn't pop on her dress. So that is also a thing that you really need to think about when shooting your project, is time of day. For example, another example is I could have never achieved this shot around this time of day, even though it is roughly the same position for the camera. It was just shot like 5 hours later. So this was almost midday, and this was before the sun was rising. You can see the immense difference. Couple things to keep in mind: time of day, set design, what kind of colors, what kind of lights, what kind of practicals though, and what kind of dresses, what kind of clothes. All these things matter. So what are you choosing to be in your frame? Because those things will ultimately decide whether your color grading is going to be on point or not. The good example is, check out Joker. Joker is by far the most thought out film in my opinion, color wise, because they use a lot of colored light, but they also use a lot of colored set design and colored like things in the frame. It's just, I don't know, beautiful. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, there's one thing that I want to mention. You see this frame? It's kind of maybe washed out a little bit, maybe like a nice glow around the light, and that is not done with a Tiffin Black Promise filter or any expensive filter. I made this myself. So this is the version 2 that I made. This is a little bit more intense, but this is a UV filter from Amazon. It is $5, I think, and this is some spray paint. So I just spray painted the UV filter just a little bit, and you get this result. So yeah, kind of interesting how cheap things can or DIY rather, can create beautiful results. Anyway, enough rambling. Yeah, cool. Right, see you guys later. Yo.